We've been taught to imagine memory as a library, an archive filed in chronological order, but this timeline model is biologically inaccurate. If memories were retrieved like files from a drawer, the process would take time. A chronological model cannot account for the instantaneous, hyper-associative speed of implicit, sensory-triggered recall. To understand how the brain actually accesses information, we need a different architecture: the Dynamic-Holographic-Implicit, or DHI, memory model. The foundational axiom of the DHI framework abandons the Cartesian timeline entirely. Instead, memory operates within a non-chronological state-space manifold. Inside this manifold, past, present, and future events are not separated by time. They are connected exclusively by thematic and emotional resonance, coordinated primarily by the brain's default mode network. A model of passive storage fails to account for the reality of subcortical activity. Under the DHI framework, memory acts as a living, dynamic fabric, constantly woven and rewoven by the brain's deepest nodes. Look at this archival photo of a subject wired for a standard EEG. Historically, cognitive science relied on localized brain state monitoring to study declarative memory. But implicit memory, the system governing our immediate reactions and habits, is fragmented and distributed across the entire cortex. The brain functions as a prediction engine. It constantly constructs present reality by pulling multi-temporal sensory cues to anticipate what happens next. When an experience triggers high emotional arousal, the amygdala acts as an architect. It tags those dispersed sensory fragments and builds privileged synaptic shortcuts between them. The resulting architecture is an interconnected neural topology. Survival-critical associations warp the physical layout of the mind, regardless of the year or decade they were formed. This warped topology is not random. The DHI framework models the memory manifold as an environment shaped by distinct, measurable physical forces. The first of these forces is sensory gravitation. This equation formalizes sensory gravitation. Force equals a constant times intensity and salience over contextual distance squared. On this 3D grid, a strong scent creates a deep gravitational dent. Bypassing the thalamus, these signals strike the limbic system directly, forcing the neural fabric to ripple. The second force acting on the fabric is the emotional valence charge. Emotional valence equals an emotional constant multiplied by physiological arousal and its sign, positive or negative. A high negative charge, like intense fear, warps the manifold into a steep, inescapable pit. A high positive charge, like a masterfully learned skill, creates a stable orbit. These two forces, sensory gravitation and emotional valence, interact continuously to construct the permanent physical geometry of an individual's associative inner space. Because of this geometry, a singular sensory cue does not prompt you to retrieve a memory. It causes a hologenic projection, instantly casting a complete past state onto your present manifold. We see clinical proof in trauma patients. A specific cue, like a slamming door, instantly triggers a full-body re-experiencing of the traumatic event. In a flashback on the left, a sensory input hits hyperconsolidated DHI pathways, igniting a subcortical web that bypasses the hippocampus. On the right, a dementia patient's degraded hippocampus erases facts, but an auditory cue still activates a fully intact peripheral loop. Musical and olfactory memories survive because they are trait crystallized within distributed networks like the basal ganglia and amygdala, rendering them immune to hippocampal decay. The persistence of these sensory emotional networks reveals a deeper layer of the self. Even when chronological facts fade, the non-linear DHI architecture continues to dictate behavior, forming the resilient core of an individual's identity. The steep pits and orbits created by valence and gravitation act as trait potential wells, regions of extreme gravitational pull within the brain. This equation maps how wells dictate action. Memory integrates a past state, projecting onto the present, causing a behavioral collapse. When a cognitive trajectory approaches a deep well, it spirals into the center, collapsing energy to manifest a specific behavioral trait. A single core well, like an embedded fear of failure, has infinite contextual expressions. Depending on the environment, that one gravitational pull can collapse into procrastination, drive obsessive perfectionism or trigger sudden aggression. Our behaviors are rarely isolated choices. They are the inevitable physical consequence of our present state interacting with the gravitational landscape of our past. The memory manifold is permanent, but it is not rigid. It is governed by a third property, neuroplastic permeability. Modulated by neurochemicals and predictive error, the fabric can be continuously rewoven. This framework treats therapy as the applied physics of gravitational lensing. Instead of managing a patient's narrative, the behavioral designer targets the underlying geometry of the manifold. The DHI reweaving protocol begins by deliberately reactivating a maladaptive memory. This triggers a hologenic projection, which opens a neuroplastic reconsolidation window that lasts for approximately 5 hours. Within that 5-hour window, the clinician introduces a mismatch or a tangible safety proof. Injecting a positive stimulus while the memory is chemically labile alters the negative emotional valence charge. The steep walls of the trauma well physically flatten out into a gentle, navigable valley. Understanding this mechanism requires strict ethical boundaries. The exact same process used to neutralize a phobia can be manipulated to implant false memories, or exploited by commercial designers using sensory triggers to aggressively shape consumer habits. Mastering the mechanics of the hologenic fabric provides the tools to build human behavior from the substrate up. Practitioners become architects of the inner space they once only observed.